Okay, so I did the Can You Filter Your Water challenge. This is how I ended up setting mine up. I started out with the cup on top with some mesh. The cup below it had cheesecloth in it. The next one, charcoal. Here I had a coffee filter, sand. The last cup I had gravel, and then obviously my last cup is what collected the water that was filtered through. As you can see over here, this is the water that I started with. I went to my backyard, I grabbed some dirt, some soil, mixed it with some water, and before I poured it into the contraption, the water filter itself, I mixed it with alum. So the first thing I did was I mixed, like I said earlier, I mixed the dirty water with the alum and I let it sit for a few minutes. I didn't notice a huge change like I had noticed in the videos that I watched beforehand, but I let it sit and then I poured that through the top cup. I did realize that once I had started pouring that I didn't make the holes big enough. The process was super slow and took a really long time, so I went back through and I made the holes a little bit bigger to help make the process go a little bit more smoothly. So here are the individual stages. This is what the mesh stage looked like. Obviously, as you can see up top here, the mesh itself caught the big chunks of dirt and tan bark that was collected. The cheesecloth looked like it caught a little bit more of the dirt, and the cheesecloth turned colors a little bit. It was much whiter and it turned a little bit brown. The charcoal, here you can see a little bit. I was surprised that the charcoal didn't really go through as much as I thought it would onto the coffee filter, which you can see here. And I think it actually worked out really well that I put the coffee filter after the charcoal because it helped catch some of that black dark color and some of the specks that did make it through. The next was the sand, which I expected, again, more of the sand to fall through. Some of it did fall through into the gravel. You can see the picture's kind of small, but in person you could have seen it a little bit. And then the gravel itself did a nice job of being the last step of filtering out any last things. So this is what it looked like at the end. I left it in the cup originally so you could see what it looked like in the cup, and then I poured it into a clear glass so you could see. It's definitely cleaner compared to the first slide, but it definitely was still a little bit discolored and a little foggy, but overall it definitely did its job. So I looked at the inquiry continuum that was provided in the module, and I went through each step and I kind of decided what I thought this experiment represented. So for the first one, learners are engaged in scientifically oriented questions. This one I went with the more teacher guided one where it said learners engaged in question provided by teachers or materials because the question was provided by the teacher and so was the materials for the most part. The second question about learners giving priority to evidence, which allows them to develop and evaluate explanations that address scientifically oriented questions. I went with more on the learner self-directed side where it says learner directed to collect certain data because we were told, what the goal was, what we were supposed to be collecting, what we were supposed to be doing, what we're supposed to make. The third step, learners formulate explanations from evidence to address scientifically oriented questions. I went again more towards the learner self-directed one. Learner formulates explanation after summarizing evidence. The next one, learners evaluate their explanations in light of alternative explanations, particularly those reflecting scientific understanding. I went again more towards the learner self-directed side with learner directed toward areas and sources of scientific knowledge. The last one, learners communicate and justify their proposed explanations. And I went with the full learner self-directed. We communicate and justify our explanations by this presentation and the screencast. So overall, the activity is definitely more learner self-directed than it was teacher guided.